Rain hammered the cabin when he opened the door. To a soldier mother, her twins, and a figure watching from the trees. Days of closeness and danger bled together until the shadow stepped into the light, and the fight for safety became the birth of something unbreakable. If stories of quiet courage, found family, and love born in the storm speak to your heart, I invite you to subscribe. Stay with us for more tales where danger tests the spirit, kindness mends the broken, and every ending carries a promise of new beginning. The rain had been building for hours, a steady percussion on the cabin's tin roof that blurred into the kind of sound you felt in your bones. Cole Maddox sat in the armchair near the fire, fingers curved around a chipped mug, the bitter warmth of coffee seeping into his hands. Outside, the wind bent the pine boughs until they swayed like they might break, and the smell of wet earth drifted through the cracked window. Liam was on the floor by the couch, fitting two cushions together to make a wall for the fort he'd been building since breakfast. The boys had been in concentration, sandy brown hair falling forward, lips pursed as if the structure's stability might determine the fate of the whole room. The knock came sharp and sudden, an intrusion that didn't belong to any neighborly rhythm. 3 raps, quick and urgent, swallowed almost immediately by the storm's roar. Cole's head lifted. He didn't move at once, letting the sound echo through the cabin, waiting to see if it had been imagined. But Liam froze too, his small hand stilling over a pillow seam, eyes tilting toward the door. Another knock, this time louder, followed by the faint sound of water dripping onto the porch boards. Cole set his mug down on the windowsill and rose. The floorboards creaked under his weight, a sound almost lost in the restless hiss of the storm. As he crossed the room, he glanced toward the side window out of habit, scanning the blurred green of the tree-line. In the rain's distortion, the shapes of the pines shifted, and for a moment something stood too still among them. He told himself it was nothing, shadow, trunk, imagination, but the image stuck as he reached the door. He unlatched it and pulled it open, the wind pushing back against him. Rain flung itself inside, cold against his face. A woman stood on the porch, soaked through from hair to boots. Her dark hair clung to her cheekbones, her shoulders squared against the chill, and a military jacket hung heavy and dripping from her frame. Her breath came in slow, measured pulls, as if she'd forced it into control before knocking. Behind her stood 2 small children, 1 boy, 1 girl, both clutching worn backpacks to their chests. The boy's jacket was too big for him, navy waterproof with a frayed cuff. His hazel-green eyes studied Cole without blinking. The girl had long, damp, light brown hair, a maroon raincoat, and eyes the soft gray of the low sky. She pressed close to the woman's leg, her free hand holding a chipped star-shaped hair clip like a talisman. Cole's gaze flicked past them to the trees beyond the yard. Through the blur of rain, a figure stood at the edge of the forest, unmoving, broad-brimmed hat, tall frame. The distance and the weather erased the face, but the posture, watching, waiting, cut through the storm's haze. "You need something?" Cole's voice carried over the rain, low and steady, though his hand tightened on the door edge. The woman met his eyes. It was the only light we saw. Her voice was even, not pleading, but her shoulders had a slight tremor. She didn't glance back toward the trees. He hesitated. The storm clawed at the cabin's eaves, and behind him the fire cracked, sending the smell of charred pine into the air. Liam had come to stand a few paces away, blanket over one shoulder, watching with an alert stillness that reminded Cole of a much younger version of himself. "Come in," he said finally, stepping aside. The woman guided the children through the doorway. The boy's shoes squelched against the mat. The girl's rain boots left small puddles that glistened in the lamplight. Cole shut the door against the wind, the sudden quiet inside making the sound of dripping water seem louder. Liam moved toward the couch, pulling the blanket from his shoulder and holding out to the little girl, without a word. She blinked up at him, then took it, wrapping it around herself in a way that swallowed her small frame. "Towels are in the basket by the hearth," Cole said. The woman knelt to unlace the children's boots, her hands quick but gentle. She didn't remove her jacket, though water pooled on the floor beneath her. Cole crossed to the kitchen corner, filling the kettle from the pump. "Teal, help," he said, not looking at her. He struck a match to the stove, the sulfur smelled sharp before the flame caught. "You live here with your boy?" she asked, her tone almost casual. "Just me and Liam," Cole said. He didn't add more. The kettle began its low hum. Liam sat on the edge of the couch now, the girl beside him, both watching the flames in the hearth. The boy, Evan, Cole heard her call him, stood near the arm of the chair, clutching a small cloth pouch in both hands. His eyes flicked from the fire to windows, like he expected something to appear there. The woman moved to the fire, resting one hand on the back of the couch. She wasn't shivering exactly, but there was a tension in her stance. Her weight shifted like she might spring into motion. A folded piece of paper bulged in her jacket pocket. Her fingers brushed it twice in the time it took the kettle to boil. Cole set the mugs on the low table, the steam rising between them. She murmured a thanks, lifting hers carefully. The children sipped from theirs in small, cautious mouthfuls. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to shake the window glass. Liam jumped slightly, and Cole saw the woman's hand twitch toward the twins before she caught herself. "You came far?" Cole asked. "Far enough." No elaboration. Her gaze settled on the fire again, as though the heat anchored her. Liam drifted to the window, tugging the curtain aside. "Dad," he said softly. Cole crossed in 2 steps, looking past him into the gray. Nothing but rain and the restless sway of trees. "Close it," Cole said, voice steady. Liam let the curtain fall. By the time the fire had burned lower, the woman's posture had eased just slightly. The children's eyes were half-lidded, heavy with exhaustion. Liam curled into the armchair with his blanket, while the girl slumped against her brother's side. Evan kept the pouch in his grip, even as his chin tilted toward his chest. "You can stay here tonight," Cole said. The words came out before he'd weighed them fully. The woman looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring something in his expression. She nodded once. When the last lamp was dimmed, the room fell into a gentle darkness, broken by the shifting glow of the embers. Rowan. He learned her name just before she closed her eyes. Slept with the twins on the couch, their forms huddled together beneath the blanket Liam had given them. Cole stood at the door, one hand resting on the frame. The rains had filled the night, but his gaze stayed on the tree-line, where shadows pooled at the roots of pines. The figure was gone, if it had ever been there at all. Still, he kept watching until the fire sank to coals. Morning brought no sun, only a softer shade of gray pressing against the cabin's windows. The rain had eased from its nighttime fury to a steady curtain, the drip from the porch roof landing in rhythmic splashes into the puddles below. Cole stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, the smell of damp pine seeping in through the cracks. Behind him, the scrape of chair legs on the floor signaled the woman was awake. Rowan moved quietly, her hair tied back, the olive green of her jacket still dark with yesterday's rain. "Thank you for letting us stay," she said, her voice low enough not to wake the children still huddled on the couch. Cole glanced over his shoulder. Storm's not done yet. He dried his hands on a dish towel. "You're better off inside. I don't take charity." Her gaze flicked toward the door, then back. "Let me help. Chores, repairs, whatever you need." He considered her for a moment. People passed through from time to time. Hunters, hikers who'd lost their way, but they never offered to work. They never stayed longer than they had to. "Barn door latch is loose," he said finally. "Wind rattled it clean open last night." Rowan nodded. "Show me." The barn sat a short walk from the cabin, the earth between slick with rain. The twins trailed after them, small boots sinking into the mud. Liam appeared from the porch, pulling on his jacket, and without being asked fell in beside Evan. The boy didn't speak, but his small fingers hooked into the edge of Liam's sleeve, as though the tether steadied him. Inside the barn, the air smelled of hay and damp wood. Cole pointed out the latch, bent and half-pulled from the doorframe. Rowan crouched, her fingers running over the metal with practiced precision. She worked without chatter, finding the tools she needed without asking, and within minutes had the latch sitting flush again. "You've done this before," Cole said. "Not a barn door," she replied, tightening the last screw, "but the principle's the same." She rose, wiping her hands on her jacket. Outside, Liam and Evan were kneeling in the wet grass, showing Elsie the row of stones they'd set to mark a pretend boundary for the chicken pen. The girl's hair stuck to her cheeks in damp strands, but she smiled at the line of mismatched rocks as if it were a castle wall. Back inside, Rowan followed Cole to the kitchen. He lit the stove for coffee, the warm smell filling the small room. Liam fetched a carved wooden horse from the biscuit tin under his bed and carried it to the table. "Mom made this," he told Evan, turning in his hand so the grain caught the light. She was good at making things. Evan's fingers hovered above the toy, not quite touching it. He glanced at Rowan, who gave a slight nod. The boy took the horse, tracing the smooth curve of its neck. "It's nice," he said quietly, before handing it back. His other hand stayed tucked around the small pouch in his jacket pocket. "What's in there?" Liam asked, curious. Evan's eyes shifted down. "Something from when we had to run." He said it simply, without elaboration, and Cole caught the way Rowan's shoulders stiffened before she cut in. "It's important to him," she said, ending the subject. By afternoon, the rain still hadn't stopped. Cole carried wood from the stack out back, the air sharp with the scent of wet bark. Halfway to the porch, a flicker of pale caught his attention, a glint in the tree lean. Eyes, cold, unblinking, the color of a washed-out sky. They vanished as soon as he fixed on them, but his pace quickened until the door shut behind him. He said nothing about it at first, though his gaze drifted to the windows more often. Rowan noticed. He could tell from the way her own eyes followed his line of sight. She didn't ask, but the corners of her mouth pressed into a thinner line. Liam and the twins passed the time drawing near the hearth. Elsie hummed softly, the same small tune she carried the night before, until Rowan told her to hush without looking up from the kettle. The children's voices dropped into the companionable quiet of pencil against paper. In the evening, the storm swelled again, wind pulling at the eaves until the cabin seemed to lean into its own weight. The sound filled every corner, leaving only the fire's occasional pop to break it. Cole was cleaning his rifle at the table when the knock came. Slow, deliberate, he set the rifle down, stood, and crossed the room. Rowan was already on her feet, her body angled toward the door. When he opened it, there was no one, only the hiss of rain and the dark blur of trees. Then he looked down. A strip of fabric lay on the porch boards, soaked through. He bent to pick it up. Military issue. Rowan's breath caught. Her hand gripped the table's edge, knuckles pale. She didn't reach for the fabric, but her eyes stayed on it as though it might burn through the wood. Cole shut the door, the latch clicking into place. The firelight cast them both in a muted gold, the sound of rain wrapping the cabin like a shroud. Neither spoke. The children had gone still, watching the adults with wide, unblinking eyes. Cole laid the fabric on the mantel, not out of care, but because he wanted it in plain sight. Rowan stood there a long time, her jaw tight, before she turned away. Outside, the storm swallowed the world again, but Cole knew the knock hadn't been made by the wind. By the third day, the rain had settled into something heavier than weather. It had become a presence, a constant voice pressing against the cabin walls. Water sheeted down the windows in silver threads, and the yard had turned to a shallow lake, grass disappearing beneath the slow ripple of runoff. The sound was everywhere, on the roof, in the gutters, dripping from the porch into the swelling puddles. It was the sort of rain that erased the notion of outside, trapping everyone in the same small space, forcing patience. The children had built a fort in front of the hearth. The blanket draped over 2 chairs, weighted at the corners with firewood. Liam was inside with Elsie, handing her pencils as she drew on folded scraps of paper. Evan sat just outside the entrance, his pouch clutched to his chest, eyes moving between the fire and the front door. The steady orange glow painted their faces in warm light, though beyond the window everything was washed in cold gray. Cole had taken to carving in the afternoons, the shavings curling onto the work table in pale spirals. Rowan found him there after the children had settled, her boots leaving damp prints on the floorboards. She stood for a moment without speaking, watching his hands move with the blade, coaxing a shape from the block. "You always make birds?" she asked finally. "Depends," he said, glancing up. "This one's a wren." She stepped closer, studying the rough form. "I used to draw birds for them," she said quietly, nodding toward the fort. "When they couldn't sleep, I'd tell them what each one meant. Freedom, endurance, survival. The knife paused in his hand. And this one? She shrugged, eyes on a half-finished carving. I guess I never got to that one. Her fingers found a folded letter in her jacket pocket. She pulled it free, smoothing the creases without looking at the words. This was supposed to be a promise. Instead, it turned into a warning. Cole didn't ask for details, but she went on anyway, the words slow, deliberate. Their father doesn't let go. When I left, he followed. Different towns, different nights, until I stopped believing in safe places. He set the knife down. You think he's the one out there? I don't think, she said. I know. Before he could answer, a sharp rap on the side window jolted the room. Liam's head popped out for it, eyes wide. Cole crossed the window in 3 strides, but when he pushed the curtain aside, there was only the curtain of rain and the warped reflection of the room's lamplight. Still, in the mud below the window, 2 fresh footprints face a glass. They spent the next hour reinforcing the door. Rowan showed him how to wedge the chair under the handle and shift the lock plate, so it couldn't be jimmied. Cole led her through the narrow hallway to the back entrance, explaining where the tree line was closest and which paths stayed driest in the rain. They didn't talk about why they were doing it. The work itself said enough. That night, with the storm at full voice, they all ate close to fire. Elsie leaned into Rowan's side, eyelids heavy. Liam sat cross-legged, holding the wooden horse on his lap. Evan edged closer to Liam, the pouch still in his grip. When the twins had gone quiet, Rowan shifted, pulling the pouch from Evan's hand. She opened it just enough for Cole to see the small metal bird inside. Its wings were dented, one eye missing, but the shape was still clear. I gave it to him one night when they couldn't sleep, she said. Told him it would remind us we could fly away if we had to, even if it was just in our heads. Cole nodded, his eyes on the little bird. That's something worth holding on to. Later, when the children had drifted into sleep in their makeshift fort, Cole fetched a blanket from the back of the couch. Rowan was in the armchair, her head tipped back, exhaustion softening her features. The twins lay curled together near the fire, their breathing steady. Cole draped the blanket over them all, his hand lingering a fraction longer over Rowan's shoulder before he stepped back. The generator cut out just past midnight, the cabin plunging into darkness broken only by the faint red glow of embers. Cole woke to the absence of the low hum, his senses sharpening in the sudden quiet. Then came the sound, soft, deliberate steps on the porch boards. He rose without a word, the floor cold under his bare feet, and took the rifle from its place by the wall. The front door's latch made a muted click as he eased it open. Rain gusted in, stinging his face. A knife was embedded in the center post of the porch. Pinned beneath it, a piece of paper sagged in the wet. Ink bled in uneven streaks, but the words were still legible. They belong with me. He pulled the paper free, the knife coming loose with it. Behind him, a floorboard creaked, Rowan barefoot, her expression taut in the dim light. Her eyes went to the paper, then to his, and for a moment the storm outside seemed quieter than the silence between them. The rain had sharpened the needles by nightfall, driven sideways by a wind that rattled the shutters and made the lantern flame bow inside its glass. Cole moved to the cabin in deliberate silence, checking each lock again. The rifle was propped within reach near the hearth. Upstairs, Liam and the twins had been coaxed into the loft, blankets piled high around them, the sound of the storm a constant veil to their murmured voices. Rowan sat at the table, her hair damp from the earlier trip to the woodpile, her jacket slung over the back of her chair. The letter lay beside her hand, the paper soft from being folded and refolded. She stared at it as though it might change if she watched long enough. "He'll come tonight," she said finally, her voice flat, not seeking agreement. Cole didn't answer at first. He poured water from the kettle into 2 mugs, steam rising between them. "Then we make sure he doesn't leave with what he came for." They didn't speak of the man directly, but his presence was thick in the room, the same way the smell of wet pine lingered even with the fire burning hot. Every creak of the walls under the wind felt like a footstep. The knock came without warning, 3 slow strikes that sounded almost polite, except for the weight behind them. Cole set his mug down, his eyes meeting Rowan's. She rose, steady but coiled, and moved to stand beside him. When he opened the door, the man filled the threshold of the storm. The brim of his rain hat dripped steadily, the pale blue of his eyes bright in the gloom. His coat was long and slick with water, the dark fabric clinging to the wiry angles of his frame. He smelled of wet earth and something metallic. "Rowan," he said, the name almost a smile. She didn't move. "You need to go." His gaze flicked past her, toward the loft ladder. "They're mine." "They're not," she said, her tone quiet but sharpened to the bone. "Not anymore." Cole stepped forward, his body filling the space between them. The rifle's barrel stayed low, but ready. "You're on private property," he said evenly. "Turn around." The man's eyes narrowed, his voice tightening. "This doesn't concern you." "It does now." For a moment, the only sound was the rain striking the porch roof in an unbroken roar. Then the man moved, fast, a lunge meant to shove past. Cole met him with his shoulder, driving him back into the wet boards. The rifle clattered to the porch as hands and rain tangled. Rowan was there in an instant, her grip finding his wrist, twisting until the knife he'd drawn clanged to the floor. He snarled, pulling free. But Cole caught the front of his coat, using the slickness of the rain to pivot him toward the railing. The wood groaned under their combined weight. Somewhere beyond the trees, the faint rise of sirens began to cut through the storm. The man froze, eyes darting toward the sound, calculation flickering across his face. Rowan stepped in, her stance wide, ready to block him again, but he wrenched free of Cole's hold and leapt down into the mud, vanishing into the black between the pines. They stood there breathing hard, the rain plastering hair to their faces, clothes heavy with it. The sirens grew louder until a flash of headlights carved the tree-line. The sheriff's truck sliding to a stop at the edge of the yard. Two deputies splashed forward, their voices low but urgent. Rowan gave her statement in clipped sentences, her hand steady even as the adrenaline ebbed from her posture. By the time the man was found half a mile down the road and taken into custody, the wind had lost some of its teeth. Rowan lingered on the porch steps, elbows on her knees, head bowed. Water streamed from her hair, pooling at her feet. Cole came back from speaking to the sheriff and sat beside her without a word. The heat of the cabin waited behind them, but neither moved toward it. After a long while, she exhaled, the sound thin but deliberate. "I haven't felt safe in years," she said. "Not until this week." He looked at her, the lantern light from inside catching her eyes. "You didn't have to do this alone," he said quietly. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "You didn't have to open that door." "Maybe not," he said, "but I'm glad I did." For a moment, neither spoke. Then their hands brushed, a subtle touch that held more weight than it seemed, a quiet acknowledgement of something forming between them that didn't need naming yet. From the loft came the sound of children's voices, sleepy but alive with the afterglow of fear past. Evan asked if the rain would stop soon. Liam's answer was muffled, but it carried a calmness learned from his father. Rowan glanced toward the yard, where the puddles reflected the first hints of a lighter sky beyond the clouds. The rain still fell, but softer now, as though the storm had spent itself. She sat back, shoulders loosening for the first time, and watched the ripples fade in the water. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. She was looking forward. And so, with the storm behind them and a fragile peace taking root, they stepped into a future neither had dared to imagine. If this story touched you, subscribe and join us for more heartfelt tales where love finds its way, even to the darkest nights.